support Donald Trump?
I do, tentatively. And I guess I kind of want to explore that with you because I really enjoy your style of debate, and I fall probably somewhere weird on the political spectrum.
Sure. So why do
Right
you
on.
support Trump?
Well, I believe that his administration touts a focus on economic domestic growth that I feel the current Democratic Party doesn't represent effectively. And it's less an issue of me loving how Trump is implementing that, because I think the Big Beautiful Bill has a lot of failings. As much of it is his flagship legislation. I think that it should not be cutting so much from Medicaid and from SNAP because those are things that we need. FDR back in the 30s, that's a left leaning president I can respect. He instituted those things largely as a form of a social safety net because every developed country needs one. But what I do think was beneficial was his emphasis on financially supporting new and growing families with the Trump accounts, which I don't like how egotistical it comes across as, but the idea of a tax advantage savings account is really great, especially considering that the growth on the loan is tax advantaged or tax deferred as well. I feel like that kind of program and the rhetoric surrounding that kind of program is really positive because we do have an issue with financial education in this country, with financial stability, especially with young people.
For sure. So there's a few things I could address here. In terms of economic domestic growth, we've actually seen less economic domestic growth under the Trump administration that we would have saw under the Biden-Harris administration. And we can also see under the first administration, there was actually a decline in domestic manufacturing investment under Trump's term. For Biden's term, there was a massive increase in domestic manufacturing investment, accounting for inflation on both of those. And then since Trump's got in office, there's been a decline. And that's mainly due to the fact that there's increase in cost of production for domestic manufacturers in the United States, but not much of an incentive for them to bring back manufacturing to the United States because there's not certainty
And focus on employees.
The tariffs aren't certain because of the next president can just come in and overdo them because it's executive based, it's not legislative based, so it doesn't really provide much of an incentive there. Plus, it is the case that in terms of it, it's become more expensive because of bringing in goods from all across the country. Like we might assemble things in the United States, but the aspects of the process in assembling them, right, become more expensive because they have to bring those materials to the United States to manufacture them in the United States, therefore making it less incentivized to manufacture those goods in the United States because it costs more to manufacture those goods. So oftentimes it's just that the consumers end up eating the costs on that, which is what we're seeing in the long run. We're seeing inflation trend
With
up
tariffs.
since April. Yeah.
No, so I absolutely agree with you in that regard. I think when I say I'm in a weird political position, I am very much, I guess, ideologically, a lot of my ideals are left leaning. But the manner in which I saw the Democrat Party approaching this election, I felt like there was too much of a focus on, what I've heard called the great injustice paradox. The idea that, we need to focus our politics on human compassion, things like that. And those are very important things. I'm deeply religious and, I believe that human compassion is core to my belief system. It's the second commandment is loving your neighbor as you love yourself. And I do think that needs to be emphasized, and the Republican Party is doing a terrible job of that. There's a lot of hateful rhetoric, but what I do support is the fact that it is being communicated in such a way that people are rallying around it and understand it. And when they see negative impacts from, the implementation of these policies that don't effectively use the actual powers of the executive branch and instead rely on, pretty much baseless claims about what the legislative branch can or will do, even though Donald Trump is not every member of the House of Representatives and the Senate. I feel like, one, we'll see a greater swing towards more social safety net focused and, generally speaking, center-left policy building. And in the long run, I feel like Trump's impacts on the economy will have a positive benefit, specifically with regards, like I said, Trump accounts and what I suspect is going to be some employer-related incentives, for production, because they can't keep up the whole concept they've got going on right now without pushing themselves towards that. I feel like, Trump is not the smartest guy alive, but I do believe that he does have a reasonable number of people around him that they'll say, hey, if you want to talk about this working class first logic, that won you votes back in West Virginia and won you Pennsylvania, the whole rounds of this campaign, right, that did win him the election over Harris, that kind of former blue wall. In the next year, I'm hoping, and from what he said, I'm optimistic that we'll see some heading in that direction, right? Because on a moral level, it upsets me to support Donald Trump or say that I support Donald Trump or say that I'd vote for him. But on an ethical or at least political level, I feel like his rhetoric surrounding the economy is something people need to hear. Because maybe, 4 years from now or 2 years from now or 3 years from now, we see the Democrats kind of flip how they discuss these things. I feel like they're losing those middle country voters because they don't emphasize the working class, at least not verbally enough. And I do care about social issues related to gender inequality and things like that. But I feel like there's such a pop media emphasis on those things that it kind of disengages the party and their whole logic from being dictated towards that. I feel like the Republican Party does a better job of communicating their goal of supporting the working class. And I hope to see that policy benefits the working class. Although I know the big beautiful bill did include, a large number of tax breaks for large corporations, and that was a bit disheartening. Although I assume, I can't, prove this, and I understand that's a failing point in debate, but, more than anything, I just wanted to kind of express my opinion with you and hear how you felt about it, and, we could discuss points of contention like we have. Sorry if you hear my daughter in the background.
Sure. I think there was more of an an emphasis on people saying that the Democrats should have engaged with pop media, because a lot of people were saying that she should have gone on Joe Rogan, which she didn't. That's an example of
I
pop
did
media.
hear that. I think that you've got that that young male voter base, and I'm in Texas as well. I'm surrounded by the MAGA, and I'm MAGA in the sense that I support Trump, but I'm not MAGA in the sense that I think that we need to be hyper nationalistic. So that's why I'm so divided, right? Because the other thing is, and this is going to make me sound like a total nerd.
But before we do, can I address some of the points you brought up real quick before we move into
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. Please do.
Yeah. And maybe you could bookmark that real quick. I do want to get to that. I just want to address some of the points you've already said.
100%, Parker. Absolutely.
So yeah, I do think that there was a little bit of a point where we might have this might just be more of a miscommunication here, but it was saying you think Democrats focus too much on human compassion, but then don't emphasize their policies on benefiting the working class. So then I guess what human compassion do you think that they were focusing on too much?
So like I said, I'm a full 100% supporter of gay rights, trans rights, things like that. Again, I think that's central to Christ's message, and therefore it's central to my worldview. Jesus said to love everybody. But I think when you're in a country as deeply, deeply religious and conservatively religious as America is, we are one of the only developed countries in the world, especially the Western world, that has a 70% adherence to a single religion, in the form of Christianity. And because so much of that is concentrated in the Deep South, in the Midwest, in portions of the West Coast even, I think that because there's such an emphasis on marginalized groups, even though they do need emphasis, like I said, campaigning on a focus towards marginalized groups as a party that has already shown that they have the power to win those votes. I don't think Kamala was going to struggle with the people of color in America to grab that vote. I think that that's something that, not that she was guaranteed, and I'm glad that she did talk about issues that people of color, especially in America, are facing. People of different gender identities, people of different sexualities, etc., and especially women. I think her most popular position was that on abortion. I mean, most Americans agree with her on that, and I'm personally opposed to abortion. I am politically in support of it, up to fetal viability. I feel like, God has no place in a doctor's office.
Yeah, so I mean, you sound like you sound like you're left wing, on practically everything we've talked about. But other than the fact that you said that you don't want there to be an emphasis on marginalized groups, which to me that seems absurd. Obviously, we should put emphasis on marginalized groups, particularly that we want to help out marginalized groups. One of the marginalized groups being the working class in this country. Right, there's class division
I agree with
in our
that.
society, and there's
That's what I was trying to say.
marginalization on the basis of people's class in our society as well. So if we want to put an emphasis on the
absolutely.
working class and on people who are in need in terms of the lack of class privilege, that is putting emphasis on a marginalized group.
And I think that this is kind of core to my issue when I say I'm like in a weird position, because you're right. Again, I am basically left wing, but it's like a big but. I don't. You mentioned, yes, the working class are a marginalized group, and they're the largest marginalized group in the country, arguably, right? Because they make up the majority of the population. But in spite of that, they are not benefited by tax policies from any administration, it feels, for really the last long while. The working class has kind of been on a downturn in terms of financial mobility and things like that. What I saw in Trump is that was the group for which he focused most of his compassion. And as I detest this argument, as a lesser of two evils from a political standpoint argument, at the time, I guess, I felt as if his focus on that would directly positively impact more people than his lack of focus on other marginalized groups, and sometimes adherence or espousing of arguably really negative rhetoric.
Can you name a policy of Trump's that was beneficial to the low and middle class?
And that's my point. So that's kind of what I needed to hear. I'm at this point, I'm wondering if I was just gaslit into voting for him last election.
Maybe
that's kind of just
maybe, because here's my point. There wasn't an emphasis. Like, he said, drill, baby, drill. He said he wanted to make prices lower, make groceries cheaper. Things that definitely did not happen, weren't going to happen, and were actually going to be worse off because of his policy, due to the fact that it's tariff policy, putting upward pressure on those prices. So he might have tried to get to the average person in terms of what they are going to. The average person feels like that because they attributed inflation to the incumbent president. They attributed it to the Democrats because inflation went up under the administration. But that wasn't caused by the administration. That wasn't caused by the Biden-Harris administration. It was due to COVID and supply chain issues, and then people attributed that to the incumbent president. So that's the only reason people had this idea that, for some reason, Republicans were more likely to address the needs of people who were in the working class, because actually, if you look at the policy, Trump is increasing taxes on the working class and the low class due to the context of tariffs being regressive, and he's decreasing taxes on rich people disproportionately by, again, replacing income tax with tariffs. Income tax being progressive, tariffs being regressive, meaning if you shift the burden from a progressive tax system to a regressive tax system, it shifts the burden of taxation from those who are disproportionately rich to those who are disproportionately lower income.
Those who are not.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's based on the actual value of the dollar as opposed to the per capita value is the idea, since it's a commodity-based tax.
No, the idea is that people who are lower income spend a greater proportion of their income on consumer goods. Yeah. People who are higher income spend a lower
that's
proportion.
What I mean. It's a commodity-based tax, therefore, since it directly impacts the price of common purchases as opposed to large business scale purchases, that burden is borne by the working class. No, absolutely. And that's something I've been disappointed with. Again, like I said, I think I just got gaslit into voting for Trump. I'm in Texas, and I've been surrounded by people telling me that I hate America if I, or most especially that I hate God if I vote for Harris. And maybe that was just kind of repressed, and maybe I just kind of needed this.
No, I think that's ridiculous. I think that's incredibly divisive terminology that they're using, saying that you hate God because you voted for someone who's a Democrat, which I think you have a really good argument for saying that it upholds Christ-like values, like caring for other people, having human compassion, worrying about others, right? If Jesus were to vote in the election, I think you'd have a really good argument.
I don't think he'd vote for Trump
if he had
anymore.
You would say that he wouldn't vote for someone like Trump. And although Trump might uphold policies that are more quote unquote Christian like in terms of abortion for some people, I do think that there's a separation of church and state, and I think that it's completely in alignment with the Christian worldview to say that you're pro-choice, which is exactly what Harris does. Harris is Christian herself. And I think actually Donald Trump himself is the one who's using Christianity in order to be able to get people's votes without actually upholding the ideology. I mean, he couldn't name his favorite Bible verse. He couldn't name anything about the Bible specifically in terms of whether or not he liked the Old Testament or the New Testament more. It was clear he hasn't read it. He also dropped a Trump Bible, putting his name on top of the Bible, which is not biblical at all.
That was sacrilegious, yeah.
Yeah, all of these things are really weird. He also said that he's never asked God for forgiveness. That's antithetical to the idea of repentance. If he just is public about the idea that he hasn't repented, that's kind of absurd, right?
Yeah, I mean, James 1:5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him, right? So the concept of denying needing to ask God for advice or forgiveness, or even being honest with God. Like I believe at one point, this is what I mean is like I say I vote for Trump because I did, and it blows my mind that I did that. Um, gosh, I don't want to act like I'm like getting my mind blown and this is some like gotcha moment, but it does kind of feel like that in in retrospect because I don't get to have these intentional, intelligent dialogues. I just get surrounded by kind of the echo chamber, I believe is what you've referred to it as.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right because I think he does push the element of religion more, and I've always thought separation from church and state is important. But hearing somebody claim to espouse Christ-like belief, and an essence in the focus on God's law, effectively just Leviticus, which is Old Testament stuff. That's Mosaic law. It's not updated Christian law. Jesus would have mentioned something, I guess, about gay marriage if he had a problem with it, I think. But hearing that, just the willingness to draw on that, I think, is part of what swayed me, and has kept me kind of pumping my fist for something I maybe don't have my whole heart in, because I don't hear that, at least popularly. I don't hear this in the media, and maybe I just need to look harder. Because you just said Harris is a Christian. I had no idea. I lived in California for a while. I recall when Kamala Harris was, in office there, and I just
before you
never
go to this
heard about
point,
that.
yeah, that's totally fine. Like I totally get you on that. And oftentimes it's because, people, when they believe in separation of church and state, they think it's important not to mention that because they don't want that to be the reason as to why people support them. They want it to be for the contents of what they say. So there's plenty of context as to why a lot of people might do that. And yeah, it might be more politically advantageous to mention that you are Christian, and that's why Trump has relied on saying that he's Christian. But, I definitely don't like the idea that he's portraying himself as more Christian because actually the arguments pan out that he's like less so upholding the values of Christianity. Not less so that he's like not a real Christian, but in more so in the idea that he doesn't uphold the Christ-like values to the same degree. And that's, you take that with a grain of salt. I'm not a Christian. I grew up in a Christian household. I used to go to church every single week, twice a week. So I do know about it, but take it with a grain of salt, given that I'm an atheist. But there are other people who are Christians that have this perspective. There are, thousands of people in my comment section that are Christians that are leaning to the left, and it sounds like you're one of those. And I appreciate you coming up on having this conversation because I understand that these types of dialogues are not very commonplace, and I think that they should happen more. And that's why I do what I do.
No, and I appreciate that, and I'll leave you with this because I'm sure our time is running thin here, and I guess it's kind of turned into a circle a bit with my realization. But honestly, I want to say, for one, it's totally valid that you're an atheist. I grew up brought to church. My parents felt it was really important, even though they were kind of like agnostic-ish. My dad was definitely pretty religious, but by the age of like 8 or 9, I'd kind of distanced myself from the church because I didn't feel like what I believed aligned with what I was hearing. And that was right around when I moved to America, right? Mm-hmm. That was when I came here. And I almost immediately heard words about that I'd hear in church brought up on the news because my parents had the news playing all the time. And that was weird to me because where I was from, that didn't happen. But that distanced me, and I feel like over the next 11 years, I kind of just stayed far away from religion. I did mess around with some Eastern religious stuff, Buddhism, Taoism, etc. But I came back to Christ, to God, earlier this year, and I think the thing that's helped me a lot, and maybe this is why you're an atheist, maybe it's the same reason for you. I realized that if religion brings me joy and helps me bring joy to other people, then maybe I'm doing the right thing. And if being an atheist brings you joy and helps you bring joy to other people, helps you make people's lives better, then I don't think the God I believe in would be mad about that.
Yeah. No, I understand. So, yeah. I understand that. I like that type of perspective. I really enjoyed the liberal Christian perspective, progressive Christian perspective, when it comes to that. And I think that's generally a good thing. My disagreements on that are just about the truth of it. Not more so based on the values. It seems less of a value distinction in that context and more just like I disagree. I think that there are contradictions with it, and that's really my basis for dispute because I understand those context of being like finding something close to it. I mean, I grew up in a Christian household. I understand a lot of those things. I feel like a tie to it to a certain extent. And like I understand those people's perspectives, and especially like my mom. My mom has a liberal Christian perspective like this. I really empathize with the perspective. I just disagree with the truth of it. That's really all my dispute is on it. But yeah,
Well,
I appreciate you
as
coming
a
up.
father to it. Yeah, as a father to a 2-year-old, I think your mom did a good job, man. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a great day.
God bless. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you.